Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. I'm a tad late. Full, full honesty here. I was so into doing QuickBooks and having a rare 45 minutes between sessions that I completely lost track of time. And when I looked up, I'm like, whoops, you said you'd be somewhere right now, Vic. So that's where I am. So thank you for joining me. What I thought I'd do this week is some of you may know, but not everybody may know that I actually wrote a book back in 2012, well, published in 2012, wrote it a little bit earlier than that. And what I thought we'd do is visit that first chapter of it. So the book is called, and yes, I'm going to be looking down at it because here's the thing that I didn't realize until I wrote my own. Like, you can't stinking remember what's in your own book. So you spend so much time working on it that when you complete it and you send it off, sometimes you have to reread it to know what's actually in there. So I called it Everyone Has an It. And it's a guide to help you accentuate, accentuate, and appreciate yours. And the way that it got in there was I was teaching a class, and I was poking a little bit in having someone just identify what was not in alignment at the time, what was bugging them. And she didn't want to say anything. And I honor that. Like, I know if it's in a group setting, I don't push too hard. I may suggest that you look at it and do it on your own time. But I remember saying, well, everyone has, and she didn't want to say what it was. And I said, well, you don't have to name it. Just say it. And she's like, I don't know what it was. And I'm like, everybody has an it. And then we started laughing. In those days, we called them my bumper stickers, like the one-liners that you could put on the back of a car, and hopefully people would go, oh, yeah, maybe. Don't know what that means, like all those acronyms. I'm like, I have no idea what that stands for. Ironically, the book is built on acronyms. So it is a representation of all of the different aspects of ourselves that we have. We have inner turmoil. We have an inner truth. We can experience identity theft, not in the sense of the credit card or all that kind of thing, but in giving away our power and who we are and allowing others to take that and then to change it, transmute it, whatever the case may be. So I thought it would be fun to maybe once a month delve into a chapter and to see if we can maybe loosen up or reveal some of your own it's along the way. So it is still available in paperback. Wait till you see the picture on the back. Oh, that's so funny. You can get it through Amazon as well as a download. So it just cracks me up. So the first chapter, there's a little intro that describes what I just said to you about the it. The first chapter is, what is your current it? So identifying what you are working on right now. And the reason that that's important is because when you identify what might be, some might call it a trigger or a rub, annoyance, all of that stuff, when you're willing to identify that, you can actually clear them up and shoo them out. It doesn't matter what area of your life you're experiencing that in. So if you have a lot of stuff coming up in your work world and you're thinking it's other people, you might want to, bring it on in and see if it's not yourself. And but clearing that up, understanding what's creating the conflict. Sometimes who's creating the conflict? I don't think it's always us. I mean, sometimes people are annoying and they have their own stuff. So there's a lot of talk in the self-help spiritual community that we must always identify our shadows selves and be looking at that and be delving into it. I agree to a certain extent, but sometimes people can get stuck in that and just keep moving, and they never really achieve any happiness because they're always looking at the broken parts. So identifying the current it is where you take inventory of what's going on with your life and what isn't resonating for you, and you do something about it. So one of the things that it takes is that courage that I've spoken of before. And it may not be a courage of running into a burning building, but it still takes an incredible amount of trust and desire to know oneself, to explore all of these things that I talk about every week. So one of the chapters, are you ready to be read a story? I love being read to. Do you do Audible? I love that. I didn't realize until a few books in that I really appreciated someone reading me to sleep every night. So it would be easier for me to read this than to just give you a synopsis, and then you get a little bit of the book too, so without having to purchase. So being willing to look at whatever is feeling out of sorts with us is one of our greatest abilities. To factor, to sort, to delve into the deepest depths, and come up with that pearl of the oyster that makes being a human so great. We perhaps just need to learn how to do it without judging it so that it doesn't hurt so stinking much, right? Being able to identify that there's that thing. It is part of how I'm acting, reacting, and being in my world right now, but that doesn't mean that it has to be there forever. Little ad-libbing going on here. This is probably why I haven't done an audiobook, because I would just keep doing this. So my question is, are you ready to do that? What if I said I would be here to encourage all along this journey, and would that make it easier? Because having someone who is willing to ask you to expand, ask you to grow, ask you to look at your own stuff is so important. I wouldn't trade my Thera coach for anything in the world, because she's not afraid to call me on my shit. And I think we all need that. So one of the ways you can kind of poke your own bear and see what's going on for you is by asking the question, like, what in my life right now do I find annoying? Let's avoid naming other people when it comes to that, unless, of course, it's you. Because I know sometimes I want a break from me. And then I try to find the humor in that, because it's not going to happen even when I croak. So learning to like who you're with 24/7, it's a full-time job in and of itself sometimes. What would you like to change if you had a magic wand? And I think it's important when we're looking at what we may not particularly care about ourselves to have a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of daydreaming, a little bit of being willing to go beyond whatever the issue is to find the solution, to garner some intelligence, to be exploratory in the process rather than judgy. So how is ignoring whatever the truth may be at this moment, how is it serving you? And when I ask people a lot of the times when they're complaining or telling a story or staying in a behavior that they've said they wanted to change so many times, I inevitably will ask, well, how's this serving you? And they always say, it's not. And my return is, it is, because we don't do anything that doesn't serve us. I'm not saying it's serving you in the greatest capacity of who you are, but it is serving something. It is most likely reinforcing the idea that you should feel sorry for yourself, or you have a right to feel sorry, or I'm sad because of this, or I just can't move forward because I didn't get the education, whatever excuse is going on in there. Once you are willing to look at what it's really doing for you, then you can start to change that. So one of the things in cleaning out the house that I realized, besides the roller coaster of emotions that comes with that, one of the things I realized was, as excited as I am to move forward and to be in a space where I don't have to mow the stinking lawn, and I like mowing, but I don't want to be in charge of mowing the lawn. So I can go off and do other fun things. So one of the things I realized was I was creating more resistance in myself and pressure because I just wanted it done now. Like, I wanted everything. I wanted the house sold. I wanted to be living in a new space. I wanted to be settled. And that's just not feasible. I mean, it's not, things take time. There's a natural evolution to things that if we rush them, we usually miss a pretty good message in the middle. So my current is to slow my buns down, to appreciate the process. This is kind of a lifelong it for me, so it'll show up probably about 10, 15,000 more times. But once I did that, I realized, I can be back in the fun of it. I can be back in the appreciation that I've had this amazing house for 15 years, and the family who moves into it is going to love what we've done to it. And it helps to ease out. What was serving me was, by grumping and all that kind of stuff, it allowed my subconscious to stay in that place of pity, really, that I had to do everything. So when in reality, I have to do everything. So the current it is whatever is that little burr under your saddle right now. And then if it's filling a need within you, how can you change that, and how can you have it be something that is helping you to grow or to move forward? Because change isn't what is painful. It's the resistance to change is what hurts, right? Because we're trying to grow and expand, and in some way, because we're adorable humans, we lock it up. And rather than doing that, I'm suggesting we just ease off, kind of like when you're driving a standard. You got to ease off the clutch and ease on to the gas so that you can move forward, not make any jerky motions. So one of the areas that, when I've identified a current it that happens, is I can go into procrastination mode like you would not believe. As efficient as I am, I am also a really good procrastinator. And sometimes that is 10 minutes, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a month and a half. So the idea is to look at it and ask myself, well, what am I putting off? Most of the time, I find that we are putting off that feeling of joy, like that feeling of accomplishment, because somewhere along the line, we got the message that suffering is necessary before we make it through anything. And that's probably from watching Ancestors and everything. But I think we have to look at now and where we are and how fortunate we are, and that we're able to really shift on a dime if we want in this world. So, okay. So the procrastination usually gets in the way because we've made up some kind of fear story around it. And it's like when you're a kid and the lights were off and you thought there was a monster in your room, and then somebody turns on the light and it's the laundry you didn't put away, just making a weird shape or a stuffed animal or something. That's what this whole process of learning about oneself is. You're turning on the light and you're saying, let me at least look at what's in the room so that I can work with facts, with truth, with what I know to be now. So when you do all of that, it's no longer in control, right? All those blocks, all those things that are creating discord within yourself, they're no longer in control because they're not running the show anymore. And you can learn to appreciate the skills you've built. And we can let other people be our excuses. And I'm just not a fan of that. Take accountability, responsibility. And a lot of the times the other people in our life will be supportive. If you're bumping into a current thing, say you have an awareness, right? And you just can't address it right then. You're going into a meeting, or you have an appointment, or it's bedtime. Like, don't do that stuff at bedtime. Let yourself go night and address it in the next day. But you can make that choice to address whatever's coming up for you tomorrow, later in the day. I'll do it after the kids go to bed and I can take a breath and sit with a cup of decaf tea or something. That type of scheduling it, I don't see as procrastination. Because if you're meeting it head on, if you're looking at it and saying, now is just not the time, I need to move forward and get on with my day. But you have to meet up with you when you said you would, or the subconscious will constantly stay in that put it off mode, and then it all builds up and you have current it's waiting in line. So the commitment you're making is essentially to yourself. You've heard me say that before. If you commit to yourself, I really believe that if we commit to ourselves, we can be better stewards of the world. We can help others more because we will have felt that we received from ourselves as well. So what's your current it? Like, what are you bumping up against? A good indication is whatever you're putting off. So if you need to call someone, if you need to pay a bill, if you have been thinking about going back to school, but you just keep putting it off, that's your current it. Whatever keeps coming back around in front and grabbing your attention. Maybe it's that conversation you need to have in your relationship that this is just not working. And we either need to see a therapist, we have to get to the next level, or we have to bid each other, I love you, goodbye. Whatever that kind of like mosquito in your ear is your current it. So take this week and maybe if you've listened to the other shows, take some of those other skills and line up with it. The starting it is it. I say it a lot, but starting it really is the most important part. It's not about how long it takes us to accomplish anything, I don't think. I think it's the willingness to keep going in and saying, okay, what's the next area that I'd like to look on? And yes, it is exhausting sometimes. I like to think of it as exciting too, or I wouldn't be doing this coaching thing. So letting go of negative thoughts, as Brenda says, is it's a good current it. That's gonna be your whole life. So I would maybe frame it as learning how to see the supportive thoughts and have them be more present, more connected, more your go-to. Because if you are focusing on letting go of negative thoughts, guess what's going to show up in, proliferation? It's just going to keep going and growing. That's why, like, you can get people who are professional bitchers, because they'll just move from one thing to another because they have trained their brain to only see what is not working. They have not trained their brain to see what is working. So, Brenda, you may want to become more efficient at having your conscious mind be in charge, because the negative thought systems tend to come from the subconscious. So that's the old programming that's in there, and that's in charge until we expand and have our conscious mind be our go-to. So you can, in setting the intention of releasing negative thoughts, great. But add to that with, what am I going to replace it with? Because the brain also likes a balance, right? So black, white, left, right, up, down, in, out. It likes that. So I think when we understand that about ourselves, we can start to appreciate our wiring and everything. So what are you going to invite in when you release those negative thoughts? What is going to be there so that it doesn't become a hamster wheel that you're on for your entire life, and you find yourself that cranky old lady who just complains about everybody on their front lawn or whatever. So you're in charge of how you want to wire your brain at this point. Most of us got it before we were 7 years old, and then it was reiterated by our parenting and the parenting we received, and then society and everything. So that's a noble intention, and definitely one that can be achieved. But I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't say that you're never going to get rid of all of your negative thoughts, because sometimes those are the ones that help you to move forward the most. And those are the ones that point out the area that could use a little bit of work. So whenever I have a negative self-talk, not necessarily a negative thought, those fly through pretty quickly, but a negative self-talk, I'll pause and say, okay, is that true? Or is that an old tape that's coming around and you are making it your current thing? So in moving through the book, what I actually do is address some of these issues and stuff that may be coming up, and then give fundamental practices in order to shift that, kind of like I do here, but they're in written form. And the intention is for us to take a little bit of pressure off ourselves and realize that, listen, guys, we're all a work in process, and that should be exciting rather than something that we keep beating ourselves up for. I had a lovely man in here earlier today, and somebody had suggested to him that he was not living up to his full potential. And I said, well, of course not. How do you live up to your full potential when you're a soul? A soul is always growing, it's always expanding, and it's always going to be wanting to learn more. So if you're not living up to your full potential, congratulations, because if you dial that back a little bit and say, well, I may not be living up to my highest intention or what's lighting me up today. If you go with that fullest potential, doesn't it take you back to like third grade when the teacher said to your parents, Vicki is not living up to her full potential in history. She could be getting better grades. Well, I knew then it was a waste of time to study all that stuff. So at least for me, I get that there's a place for it, but there wasn't much of a place for 3rd through 12th grade for me. And I wasn't going to, because it didn't light me up. getting a B+ was good enough for me. So the process of always expanding and always having room to expand should be exciting. No red pens out there circling anything that you're doing wrong. Simply a willingness to look at it and shift the perspective of, if I continue to grow, if I am interested in knowing all the parts about me that I'd like to clear up, then I'm doing a really damn good job. And we have to start celebrating that. So the process of looking at all of this does not need to be tough. It may evoke some emotions. It will definitely get you questioning, maybe, why did I spend so much time blocking my own brilliance? I'd much rather people be looking at what lights them up and then be of service than to trying to reach a bar somewhere. And the reason I bring this up is most of our current its will have a limiting energy to them. They'll have a limiting belief system behind them. And oftentimes that's been graciously donated by others. And I think we need to return, just return it and say, I get that that's what you thought, teacher of mine years ago, but I know who I am today, and I'm much more interested in the history of people than in the things that we did back in 1812. So this week, have some fun with it. Please have some fun with it. And make, if you like to go to this level, you make a, those old steno pads, right, with a line down the middle. I just always assume you guys are nodding, like when I ask a question. So it's me being in my own space. So if you can imagine that steno pad and you have it down the middle, right, be willing to make a list. If it comes up that way, it might come up as one, of what you want to shift within yourself. The other side of it is, what could you do? Like, what could you do in this moment? I could speak kindly to myself. I could get off my arse and go fold some laundry. I could call that person. I could pay that bill. I could stop allowing excuses to be my go-to, and I could allow excitement to be where I go instead. So as you're going through it, be mindful of where you may have learned to align with it you got going on, but don't point fingers at other people, because if you're blaming, you want to stay the same. You want to stay in whatever you're doing. So bring it, like I said, bring it back home. Pay attention to yourself. So thank you so much for coming in, and it was nice to see all of you pop up there. I get like an energy surge when you guys sign on, because everybody has their own energy signature. It's like your fingerprint or your eye or whatever. So everyone has their own unique stamp. So whenever anybody logs up and the name comes up, I get like this little so thank you for my infusion. And if you have any questions or anything that came up as a result of this, feel free to private message me or email Smoke Signal. And I so appreciate you. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Rumor has it the big gold ball in the sky is going to show up in the east. So let's spend a couple moments soaking that in, taking deep breaths, and appreciating each other. Take care. Bye-bye.